FM, and yes, we are also streaming live on FBN TV. That's our YouTube TV channel, as well as on Facebook every Wednesday, 8 to 9 p.m. Hello, I'm Stephen Cummings, inviting you to the Citizens Community Forum every Wednesday on Isaac 98.1 FM, and yes, we are also streaming live on FBN TV. That's our YouTube TV channel, as well as on Facebook every Wednesday, 8 to 9. Also streaming live on FBN TV. That's our YouTube TV channel, as well as on Facebook every Wednesday, 8 to 9 p.m. Hello, I'm Stephen Cummings, inviting you to the Citizens Community Forum every Wednesday on Isaac 98.1 FM, and yes, we are also streaming live on FBN TV. That's our YouTube TV channel, as well as on Facebook every Wednesday, 8 to 9 p.m.
Once again, want to say hello to our overseas listeners. We have Monica, Sybil J, and Carlo in Boston. We have Edlin in Canada, Gloria in Canada, and then we have Heather Taylor once again in Birmingham, England, who's locked on and listening, enjoying this one, Baba, a definite anthem, she says. Enjoy. Citizens Community Forum is up next. The girl Trish, how you doing, Trish? Blessings to you as well.
Do you know why people like our station?
It's amazing.
We inspire families. We inspire you.
Yeah, it's obviously it's feel good music.
Our listeners love our station so much, they listen even while they are sleeping.
When I get home, I want to go to bed.
This is your blessed, best pioneering station, Isaac 98.1 FM.
Be part of the Citizens Community Forum.
When we talk about witness protection in Trinidad and Tobago, do you have any concerns that we may still not have the proper kind of witness protection program?
Our witness protection program is not the best protection program. We have had complainants wanting protection to give information about a police officer because they fear for their life.
But Mr. Cummings, I think you hit the nail on the head a little while ago, because with the COVID and with the pandemic, it has caused a lot of institutions to treat with the way you deal with business in a more efficient way.
Let's discuss the issues. Let's dialogue towards developing a deeper understanding, fostering an atmosphere of peace, all towards creating better, stronger families and communities. Right here on Isaac 98.1 FM, every Wednesday, 8 to 9 p.m. The Citizens Community Forum. Your host, Stephen Cummings. Welcome again to the Citizens Community Forum. The objective is always to have an engaging, interactive, and civil discourse on community, social, and national issues. Our guests are persons who express views and opinions of their own, views and opinions which are not necessarily that of the station, the Citizens Community Forum, or that of the host. I will defend the right of all of our guests to speak. We can disagree on many points of view, but I believe we can still grow and learn from one another in spite of a divergence of views. Now, on Saturday, June 19th, Labor Day, the Labor Day celebrations we saw were a bit different from what we have become accustomed to. We saw where the labor movement had to create a new script. And, for celebrating a decades-old event that for many years saw thousands of persons engaging in street marches, demonstrations, and proclamations, least to say one leader described Labor Day 2021 as highly unusual. Like many a year, the issues appear to remain the same, that of seeking justice, fairness, and equality, and indeed protection of the working class. This evening, inside the Citizens Community Forum, I want to reflect, in case some may have missed it, what was said on Labor Day 2021. Within the hour, we will hear from President General of the Joint Trade Union Movement, Ansel Roger, who addressed 6 main issues. He touched on health as it relates to the country's vaccination program, the economy, energy, agriculture, crime, and of course, labor. We are going to feature some highlights of Mr. Roger's Labor Day speech in the first half hour as he dealt with matters of health, the economy, and the energy sector. In the second half hour, we will then hear what the President General had to say on agriculture, crime, and labor. So this evening, inside the Citizens Community Forum, we are merely going to listen and view some of the highlights of Labor Day celebrations 2021.
Last year, Labor Day, we publicly went on record commending the government for the measures they took to contain the spread of the coronavirus. It is unfortunate that this year we are forced to express a completely different position. Last year, when I stood here on June 19th, we had 123 cases and 8 deaths. But this year, as we speak, we have over 29,600 cases and over 700 of our citizens have passed away. In May alone, we had 326 deaths. There were more deaths in May than for the entire previous year. Whilst the government seems not to be alarmed and are quite comfortable just to announce the number of deaths, what they are not telling you is that our death rate of 3.5% is higher than that of most countries. They seem to have absolutely no sympathy and empathy for the grieving families of those who were struck down by this deadly disease. In addition, they recently reported that there are 455 patients in the hospital. But wait, these are only the figures coming from the Ministry of Health's report. We are informed by our comrades in the Trinidad and Tobago Registered Nurses Association, we are informed by them that the ministry's figures do not take into account patients who are already diagnosed, critically ill, and are waiting to be assigned a bed. These are the people in the tents, in the waiting rooms, in the corridors, on chairs and benches. These numbers are not accounted for when they give their updates. They are definitely not reporting the true picture, because when these critically ill people are not being assigned a bed and properly attended to on time, their situation worsens. Whilst the public is made to believe that people in all of the intensive care units are well taken care of, the sad truth is that a number of the intensive care units are manned by general practitioners, and some people in these intensive care units are not being given the required specialized intensive care. The fact is that our healthcare system has been collapsing for quite a while, long before COVID-19, and now with the weight of the coronavirus, it has totally collapsed. The only thing that is keeping it going are our hard-working doctors, nurses, attendants, and healthcare professionals who are totally overworked, swamped, and overwhelmed. And therefore, today, we in the trade union movement vehemently condemn outright the statement made by the leader of the opposition to denigrate them, or any attempt to impute their involvement in some conspiracy to murder citizens. Downright foolishness. Such statements ascribed to our medical professionals are malicious, reckless, and downright politically stupid. We want to make it abundantly clear that we in the labor movement stand firmly behind and fully support all our committed and dedicated healthcare professionals. Last year, the government was boasting how well they were doing containing the spread of the coronavirus. Whilst they used the coronavirus as a main election platform issue and condemned the opposition for their position on it, but look at what is happening now. Clearly, the government's performance to date is nothing short of an abysmal failure in handling this pandemic. Because now that the grim reality is facing us, with thousands infected and over 700 persons dead, the government is refusing to take responsibility. But if you take credit for the success last year, then you must accept responsibility for the current failures. The government's failure to act quickly and prudently have resulted in our high numbers. The daily cases at the end of February into March this year were in single digits. But by the beginning of April, things started to change. In his typical boastful and arrogant style, the Prime Minister, while trying to justify the arrival of the inter-island ferry 5 years late, he told everyone to come to Tobago for Easter. Tobago is the place to be. Remember that statement? The opposition making a big issue about the ferry. Come to Tobago. Remember that statement? The point is, whether 50,000 people traveled over one weekend or in 1 week, the fact is that 50,000 people traveled back and forth and indeed was in Tobago for the Easter. That was a major super spreader event. But now, he refuses to take responsibility for such an irresponsible statement and its direct contribution to the high numbers today. Instead of locking down at the beginning of April, he and his government waited to the end of April, after Easter, just because he wanted to make a point about the ferry. But by then, sadly, it was too late. The numbers speak for themselves. The government has also failed miserably in their vaccination program. We are nowhere even close to where we should be with vaccination for our citizens. And herd immunity remains just an elusive dream. Herd immunity is completely out of sight because there's absolutely no clear pathway towards achieving it. Whilst the Prime Minister boasted to the world that he is not begging for vaccines, now we are at the bottom of the barrel, scraping from here, there and everywhere for vaccines for our citizens who are being infected by the hundreds every day, with many people dying daily. This country should have been the first in line with the procurement of vaccines for all our citizens. That would have allowed us to maintain full control in containing the spread of the coronavirus. Every week, we the citizens are being told that we are in a good place. And in the height of arrogance, the citizens are being scolded and talked down to by using the most derogatory, facetious, and disrespectful language. While many people are suffering, facing extreme economic trauma and hardship, loss of jobs, loss of income, with many of our people having no means to put food on the table during this lockdown, whilst this occurs, we have a Prime Minister who takes the opportunity on a weekly basis just to blame the citizens. With the government's arrogance, coupled with its ineptness, and with a total lack of vision and leadership, they have totally mishandled the procurement of vaccines. And now the situation is completely out of control. Whilst our Caribbean neighbors have been able to secure and began an effective rollout of vaccination for their citizens, as I had mentioned before, we are still at the bottom of the heap, scraping from here, there, and everywhere for vaccines. Imagine, we have only administered 168,477 doses, with only 24,018 of our citizens getting the double dose. At this critical time, we have not even fully vaccinated 10% of our population. But we have a Minister of Health who shamelessly, publicly genuflect and prostrate himself before the Prime Minister, saying that the country owes the PM a debt of gratitude. What foolishness! No, 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 Mr. Minister of Health. It is the Prime Minister who owes the country an explanation for the government's abject failure to properly respond to the pandemic, because there are no mass vaccination of our people. Clearly, the government has truly failed in the response to the pandemic. Today, we maintain that every death from the day that vaccines became available to the world, from that time to now, all of those new cases of infections and deaths are on the hands of this government. But what is the real problem with this vaccine? Whilst our poor people are in the sun and rain, especially our senior citizens who have to line up for hours to be vaccinated, with most of them being turned away without receiving any vaccine, whilst this is happening, now the country is realizing that certain surreptitious arrangements are being made to make special vaccine available for certain people. This special vaccine is not the vaccine that the citizens have been given so far. And what is worse, this secret vaccine was never mentioned by the Prime Minister in any of his weekly updates. But who are those vaccines for? Is it for the ministers and their friends, the 1%? This may not be the only time secret vaccine came into the country. We ask the question, how much more secret vaccines are entering the country? This is a major cover-up. There are definitely many unanswered questions. This government needs to come clean. They are constantly trying to fool the people. What we really have now is a vaccine fiasco in this country. They just cannot be trusted. But remember, they can fool some of the people, some of the time. but they cannot fool all of the people all of the time.
And you're listening to the Citizens Community Forum on Isaac 98.1 FM, and we are also streaming live on our FBN YouTube TV channel as well as on Facebook. Well, this evening we are focusing on the labor movement. I suppose a continuation from a previous program, but this evening is a bit different in that we want to focus on a presentation, the Labor Day speech, which was made by President General of the Joint Trade Union Movement, Ansel Roger, who has been dealing with matters of the economy, 6 main issues, and of course we just heard from the President General, Ansel Roger, as he dealt with the issue of health as it relates to the vaccination program and of course COVID-19. So what we're going to hear now is we are going to move into the area of the economy, and let's go back to Ansel Roger.
Turning our attention to the economy. Whilst the government would like to blame the pandemic for our country's bad economic performance, it is important to note that long before COVID-19 had arrived, our economy was already in deep crisis. COVID-19 only exacerbated the economic crisis. As we look at the current state of our country's economy, it is a fact that many thousands of our citizens are struggling daily just to make ends meet, with some actually not knowing where the next meal will be coming from. Such is the level of desperation that exists on the ground. Instead of diversification, there was no significant growth in any sector, and even worse, with major contraction and reduction in the heart of our economy itself, the energy sector. Instead of job creation, we have the complete opposite, where many thousands of our workers were sent home. Instead of social justice, there exist rapidly increasing levels of inequality and inequity throughout the society. This has resulted in the total decimation of our country's middle class, creating a massive disproportionate gap between the haves and the have-not. The reality is that all the gains of the past are being reversed by this PNM government. Their neoliberal policies are having a devastating effect on the country, and it has been driving our people into abject poverty. This is definitely not what Dr. Eric Williams had in mind for our people. But the facts are the facts. Tens of thousands of workers have lost their jobs. Workers at Petrotrim, contractor companies throughout the oil industry, BP, UTT, TSTT, TIDCO, ArcelorMittal, Centrin, Unilever, TCL, Trinidad Aggregate Products, Yara, and other methanol and ammonia plants workers at Point Lisa's industrial estate. Bar and casino workers, restaurant workers, workers in stores and malls. Hundreds of thousands of people have been directly affected when you consider the families of those who lost their jobs. That is this PNM neoliberal economy. That is their success story. Taken from the 2020-2021 annual economic survey, the preliminary central bank estimate suggests a significant contraction in domestic economic activity in 2020. Food inflation accelerated through the year, averaging 2.8% when compared to 2019, which averaged 0.6%. According to the Central Bank Economic Bulletin for January 2021, the estimate showed that the central bank quarterly index of real economic activity contracted by 8.7% year on year during the third quarter of 2020, based on a relatively large drop in energy output. By the end of the year, the domestic economic activity contracted overall by 7.9% in 2020. This was led by the decline of 13.8% in energy sector output, the report said. We have been saying year after year that this government has not introduced any new revenue streams. So it should be no surprise that revenue fell by over $10 billion from $46.7 billion in 2019 to $34 billion in 2020. But don't shoot the messenger. These are the facts. Check it for yourself. But instead of telling the country how the government intends to raise revenue, other than taxing blood out of stone from the people, they want workers and the people, including pensioners, to bear the full brunt of economic adjustment. This is on top of the fact that so many of our workers have already been sent home or had their income cut drastically. But what does all of this statistic mean? Well, it simply means that with the current approach and direction of this government, there will be no social programs, no gate, and even more cutbacks on allocations for our universities, namely UTT and UE. So for our youth, young people, and for workers, there will be no opportunities if they continue in that direction. Whilst the central bank bulletin stated that the short-term outlook for Trinidad and Tobago will be dictated by the evolution of the coronavirus, we would like to say differently that the short-term outlook for Trinidad and Tobago is dictated by government's response or lack thereof. But whatever happened to the report from the Committee on the Roadmap for Recovery, which was unveiled with much fanfare in July of last year? Now, quoting from the same Roadmap to Recovery Committee's report, what happened to Objective 1, social protection, leave no one behind? Well, the sad truth is that thousands of our people have already been left behind. Still with the report. And what about Objective 2, retain and create jobs? You just have to ask the thousands of workers who have lost their jobs since this report. And whatever happened to the part of the report that addresses, and I quote, sustaining lives and livelihood, reigniting the economy, end quote. Well, you only have to ask the thousands of CPEP workers who recently got a 35% pay cut to their already meager pay. But how do you cut from $1,000 a fortnight or cut from $500 a week? How can a government take away from $500 a week from people who have to support a family whilst their ministers' salaries remain untouched? How could the government be so heartless? They are taking away from those who could hardly make ends meet. This is another heartless action from a government who simply just don't care about the people. This is the punishment you get for making what they say was the right choice. Last year, we warned about the government's intention to reduce NIS benefits. 1 year later, our information is that the decision has been taken to begin implementing these reductions. One of their recommendations is to deny you your NIS pension until the age 65. After paying NIS religiously throughout your entire working life, and you now retire at age 60, and you are counting on that NIS pension, you now have to wait until age 65. So you will be on retirement without your NIS pension for a whole 5 years. After they have mismanaged the fund by not ensuring that employers are compliant in remitting both their payment and their employees' NIB contribution to the fund, with thousands of workers not being able to contribute to the fund because they are home, and with bad investment of the fund, all of this is contributing to the mismanagement of the fund. But you, the worker, have not contributed to the mismanagement. You have diligently made your full contribution during your entire working life, and now they want to deny you your NIS pension. What is even worse is that they are saying that you are living too long and that you are a burden on the state. Whilst this government is planning to deny poor people their NIS pension, ministers and parliamentarians, all of them, their pensions are guaranteed and even indexed to cope with inflation. How more unfair can these people get? These are the same people who are cutting the CPEP workers' meager salary. And what about workers from the prestige outlets like KFC, Pizza Hut, TGI Friday, Subway, and Starbucks? The little stipend they were receiving during the lockdown was stopped. What about them? And what about the other thousands of workers who have been home without any assistance whatsoever? What about the many thousands of workers who are not attached to any company, but who depend on a day work just to take care of their family? These people have not received any salary relief grant from the government. And what about the people who were sent home before COVID-19 and with the lockdowns over a year now have no opportunity to find work? What about them? The roadmap for recovery committee's recommendations clearly went the way of the Economic Advisory Committee and the Lashley Committee on Petrotrade, which is absolutely nowhere. The government refuses to take any advice from these committees, which they appointed. They arrogantly do whatever they want, even to the detriment of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. While they would say otherwise, evidently for this PNM government, the pain and suffering of so many thousands of our people just don't matter. They are simply disconnected from the reality on the ground. They are disconnected from the pain and suffering and hurt of ordinary people. And making matters worse for poor people are the fact that the banks continues to amass huge profits whilst many of our citizens go hungry. On November 9, 2020, last year, the Republic Bank website announced it recorded 904.1 million in end-of-year profits. And on May 3, 2020, this year, on the bank's website, they announced that they recorded 687.3 million in half-year profits. The First Citizen Group had recorded a profit before tax of $232.9 million for 3 months ending December 31st, 2020. Also, according to their unaudited accounts published on TNT Stock Exchange, the group's chairman stated that the First Citizen Group concluded another profitable quarter for the period ending 31st March this year, 2021, recording a before-tax profit of $207.3 million. So whilst people are struggling to maintain their families and pay their monthly installments, pay their loans and mortgages, these banks are still declaring enormous profits in hundreds of millions of dollars. But where did they get all this profit from? Today, we call on all the banks and all the lending institutions and all those stores with hire purchase arrangements who amass all the wealth from the workers and the people of this country. We call on them to give the people a real moratorium on all these outstanding installments with absolutely no interest, allowing them breathing space to put food on the table over the period of the pandemic.
And of course, the energy sector was not to be spared, and the President General, Ansel Roger, spent quite some time talking about the energy sector in Trinidad and Tobago in his Labor Day speech 2021. Let's go.
Now let us examine the performance of the energy sector. The Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, in its latest Economic Bulletin report for January 2021 this year, identified that natural gas production declined by 23.6% over the second half of 2020. Still with the report, natural gas production dropped 29.8% year-on-year during October to November 2020, alongside a 46.9% fall in LNG production. The downstream industry also saw declines in output, with methanol production declining by 29.4% during the period. while production of ammonia was down by 1.1%. Today, we want to restate that a major contributor to the decline in downstream production is the renegotiated pricing agreement between BP and the government of Trinidad and Tobago. I wish to also remind all that it was the Prime Minister and Minister Young who led that negotiation. Those negotiations resulted in BP increasing the cost to NGC for purchasing our natural gas. NGC simply passed on that cost to the gas users, which resulted in their extremely high operating costs and the eventual closure of those downstream plants on the Point Lisas industrial estate. This has resulted in the loss of jobs and foreign exchange to our country. This is why the OWTU, in the spirit of George Weeks, wrote to the CEO of BP last year, calling on him to renegotiate the badly negotiated pricing arrangement that is disadvantageous to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. This letter was hand-delivered by hundreds of energy sector workers in the height of the carnival season last year. A copy of this letter was also hand-delivered to the British High Commissioner on the same day. Today, the labor movement insists that the natural resource of this country belongs to the people of this country, and therefore the people of this country must benefit from those resources. And what about crude oil production? Based on the Ministry of Energy Consolidated Monthly Bulletin, crude oil production has fallen under heritage. The numbers don't lie. In 2016, oil production under Petrotrin in Trinma, it was 20,505 barrels per day. And in ENP land, it was 12,000 barrels per day. By 2020, under heritage, offshore production fell to 17,848 barrels per day, and heritage land production also fell to 10,683 barrels per day. So this PNM government took oil production from 32,583 barrels in 2016 under Petrotrin to 28,531 barrels under heritage in 2020. Under this PNM and their heritage model, the country had a decrease of 12.4% in daily crude oil production. Whilst heritage management are talking about some projection in the future, they refuse to tell you the facts that their oil production actually fell since they shut down Petrotrin. Under the OWTU's alternative plan to closing Petrotrin, listen now, the country would have enjoyed an increase in crude oil production by moving the same ENP land from 12,000 barrels per day to 15,000 barrels per day, and Trinma's production from 20,000 to 25,000 barrels per day for the same period without any major capital injection. By putting these low-cost measures in place, the production had already begun to increase at the time of shutdown. Let me say that again. By putting these low-cost measures in place, crude oil production in Petrotrin had already begun to increase at the time of the shutdown. So whilst they try to spin it to justify their shutting down of Petrotrin, clearly the figures speak for themselves. So in case you are opening and closing your fridge and you didn't hear, the fact is that after shutting down Petrotrin, crude oil production has actually dropped. Whilst they will tell you, the people, otherwise, the figures don't lie. But further, the situation is even worse when one considers the country's total crude oil production. Still quoting from the Ministry of Energy's monthly consolidated bulletin, the country's total crude oil and condensate production fell from 71,000 818 barrels in 2017 to just 56,472 barrels in 2020, representing a 21.3% decline under this PNM government. But don't expect them to tell you that. This information is hidden from the public. It is hidden from you, the people. We have always said that one of the greatest crimes committed against the people by this government has to be the closure of the Petroleum Company of Trinidad and Tobago. We maintain our position that it was wrong to close Petrotrin. For example, this government continues to talk about loss in government revenue with absolutely no new revenue streams. But we have always been making the point about Petrotrin's contribution to the country's economy and what the country stands to lose if they shut it down. Today, we are vindicated because we are not now projecting anything, but we can now look at the actual loss to the country since the company was shut down. Whether you as a citizen was fooled by this government's big Petrotrin lie or not, you are definitely impacted. Remember the campaign about Petrotrin's debt and its impact on the country's sovereign debt? And if they could not pay $850 million US by August 2019, what that would cause? Remember how they demonized the Petrotrin workers? Remember how they said that if they did not shut down Petrotrin, there would be no beds for the hospitals, no money for the schools, and no money for roads and other infrastructure, all of which the country is still waiting on.
The final moments of this first half hour, we are also going to hear from Mr. Ansel Roger, President General of the Joint Trade Union Movement, as he talked about the agricultural sector in Trinidad and Tobago. Let's go back to Mr. Roger.
Turning our attention to agriculture now. While the country should be enjoying an increase in local food production in a time of this pandemic, we see that the imported food on the shelves of the high-end supermarkets are full. It is clear that there is no real attempt to deal with the food import bill. It is a fact that we have a massive food import bill averaging over $6 billion TT dollars, and with COVID-19, it is even more. The refusal to deal with this issue seems to be a well-orchestrated plan by this government, which only ensures that the 1% and the major food importers, friends of this government, benefit substantially even during this crisis of a pandemic. Instead of providing support for increased local food production, our farmers are being removed from arable lands, which are now used for industrial development and housing. There is also the unfair distribution of land for agricultural purposes. While large amounts of lands are given to friends of this government, farmers who have applied and are in possession of the necessary documents are unable to acquire land. In addition, farmers have to pay more for agricultural inputs like seeds, veterinary drugs, fertilizers, and agricultural equipments. The situation is further exacerbated by our country's chronic foreign exchange shortage. Suppliers of these items are purchasing foreign exchange at black market rates and are simply passing on the cost to the farmers. The government's lack of concern for agriculture can also be seen in the reduction in the number of officers in the Predia Lassini unit. This unit is significantly under-resourced and cannot cope with the numerous cases of Predia Lassini, which will only further frustrate our farmers' efforts in growing local food for our table. More than that is the significant importation of the 3- and 4-year-old frozen meats like chicken, beef, goat, turkey, duck, and pork. Whilst this only benefits big business and big supermarket owners, it further exacerbates the foreign exchange crisis and also threatens the health, where in some cases these imported foods are unfit for human consumption.
So there you have it, the first half hour on the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings, and we are focusing on the labor movement in Trinidad and Tobago for yet another program. And we heard the President General of the Joint Trade Union Movement, Ansel Roger, as he spoke on three important matters. One dealt with the health sector, of course, COVID-19. He also spoke about matters relating to the economy as well as agriculture. So we're going to take a break now, and when we come back in the second half hour, we will continue.
07. We're right here for you. Isaac, the promise. Always number one for the family.
Do you have a business that you want advertised on social media? The Family Focused Broadcasting Network has a special offer just for you. With over 42K followers on all social media platforms, at Isaac the Promise, you're sure to get a boost for your business. With prices as low as $100 for only $250, you can get a customized flyer created by our social media team. Special price package for all church media ministries. Contact us today. Have your business flyer or video posted on all FBN and Isaac social media platforms. Contact us today for more info at 622-8981, Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. or email info@isaac981.com. Do I say glory, glory because I received or because I gave? Join us this Saturday on the Legacy Series as we speak with Mr. Ralph Musgrave. Find out about his legacy, 6 to 9 a.m. with Chris J. and J. Errol Lewis, right here on Isaac.
Is there not a cause? ITNAC is inviting you to tune into the program Advancing the Cause every second and fourth Wednesday at 9 p.m. If you're not called to stay, you should be going somewhere doing something. Contributions to our organization can be made at any branch of First Citizens Bank, account number 1660410. For more information, call us at 624-4162 or try us at 394-2042. Is there not a cause? Yes, there is. Yes, there is.
Welcome back to the Citizens Community Forum. Stephen Cummings. In the final moments of our program this evening, we are going to continue with looking at the presentation, the speech which was made by President General of the OWTU, as well as the President General of the Joint Trade Union Movement, Ansel Roger, as he spoke on Labor Day Saturday last. And of course, we are going to focus now on the business of crime and labor. So let's go back to that presentation by Mr. Roger.
And now, let us focus on the continued vexing issue of crime. Although it is not taking center stage and prominence in the media and news reports at this time, in case you didn't notice, the issue of crime has not gone away. Indeed, the issue of people being murdered and being gunned down on a daily basis is still with us. In spite of the coronavirus, a state of emergency and a curfew, citizens are still experiencing home invasions, carjackings at gunpoint, and robberies. Armed robberies in the streets and business places are still occurring. Even prison officers are being mercilessly gunned down, with shots being called from within the jail. Although these criminals wear masks like everyone else, they have no fear or care for anybody, including the police. The guns and drug trade continues unabated, completely unaffected by COVID-19 restrictions. While we, the law-abiding citizens, conform to all the measures with respect to COVID-19 restrictions and the emergency power regulations, we are like sitting ducks in our homes. It is not a matter of if you will be robbed. It is a matter of when it will happen. Whilst you can wear a mask and social distance to protect yourself against the coronavirus, there is no protection against these criminals who roam the streets and invade your homes with impunity. The government has not stemmed the flow of sophisticated guns and ammunition coming into our country, which immediately gets into the hands of the criminals as their preferred tools of trade. Whilst the PNM in opposition consistently criticized the UNC for the porous borders, under this PNM government now, the borders are still wide open. It is a fact that whilst our official ports of entry are closed, our entire country's coastline still remains wide open, where illegal immigrants, drugs and guns enter our country regularly, sometimes in broad daylight. It is the responsibility, may I remind you, it is the responsibility of every government to guarantee the safety and security of all their citizens. People actually don't feel safe in the streets or even in the sanctity of their homes anymore. The government's failure to deal with this crime situation has resulted in a state of heightened anxiety amongst our law-abiding citizens. Just ask anybody who was a victim of a crime, a home invasion or a robbery. Regardless of which party you support, the bandit is no respecter of that. When the bandit kick down your door, they don't ask you what party you belong to. Therefore, we must not allow the government to abdicate this crucial responsibility to ensure that citizens feel safe in their homes. And last, but certainly not least, the issue of labor. Before going into the issues affecting labor, we want to address the joint trade union movement's clear position on the critical issue of vaccination. Our position is that whilst we advise our members to access the vaccine, we are vehemently opposed to mandatory vaccination in all forms for any reason. We are definitely against making vaccination a condition for work. Taking vaccine is voluntary, and we will fully support anyone who exercises their right to take or not take the vaccine. On the issue of labor now, it would be remiss of me not to report on the poor state of industrial relations in our country. For the country to achieve any form of economic progress, there must be industrial peace and stability, where workers' issues are given their deserving respect and priority. Nevertheless, there seems to be a concerted effort on the part of employers, especially this government, to use the COVID-19 pandemic to take advantage of workers, displaying the highest level of disregard for the serious issues that are affecting workers. Whilst these many issues and problems are being created by employers, the mechanisms for redress at the Ministry of Labor is dysfunctional at best, and in some cases, non-existent. For instance, the conciliation unit at the Ministry of Labor is under-resourced and understaffed. This seems to be of little concern to the Minister of Labor, whose regular delay in issuing unresolved certificate has now become the norm under his watch. Most unions can point to instances in one case or another where this minister is tardy in this regard. Therefore, workers are denied a timely pathway towards justice because their matters are not being referred to the court on time. This is the same Labour Minister who claimed that unions are being disingenuous for leaving the National Tripartite Advisory Council, NTAC. Without any consideration for the serious problems we were having in NTAC from its inception, and with no discussion with trade unions, he made this reckless statement. Today we take umbrage to that statement. It was downright disrespectful to the labor movement. Well, Minister, while your predecessor earned the title of Minister of Silence, with no real achievements so far and no real work being done in your ministry, you have achieved the title of Minister of No Labor. If you were genuinely doing your work, then we would not be complaining about the failures of the Ministry of Labor. My advice to you is to learn your work and do it before jumping out unjustifiably criticizing us. But today, there are a number of issues affecting various trade unions that continues to cry out for urgent attention. For example, the TTRNA, Trinidad and Tobago Registered Nurses Association, has consistently complained about the regional health authorities and the Ministry of Health. The RHAs and by extension the Ministry of Health are currently hiring nurses and midwifery personnel as temporary employees. This trend predates the COVID-19 pandemic and has been a major contributor to nursing attrition. Due to poor hiring and poor management practices at some of the RHAs, the staffing is severely short. This short staffing has been further depleted due to the COVID-19 pandemic, with the introduction of the parallel healthcare system and with the increasing cross-infection rates within the healthcare settings. The limited amount of staff available to care for patients is having a direct impact on the quality of care. For example, one registered nurse to 30 patients is totally unacceptable, and there are actually instances where such ratios exist. Some nursing students are experiencing challenges to graduate as they have been prohibited from continuing their clinical practices or have been informed that exams were suspended. The cancellation of stipend has also been a critical concern for the Trinidad and Tobago Registered Nurses Association, as many nursing students depend on the stipend to purchase books, meals, and personal items for the duration of the program. And further, there are no strict adherence by the RHAs to the protocol that maintains proper infection and control practices, such as adequate and appropriate PPEs, consistent adherence to quarantine and isolation protocols when there are high-risk exposures. Nurses in many RHAs are not compensated with overtime for longer working hours, nor are they provided with special daycare arrangements for their children who are currently home due to the COVID-19 restrictions. JTOM also has serious concerns that the Registration, Recognition and Certification Board has been experiencing challenges to meet, and this has been a major obstacle to the TTRNA's application to be the recognized majority union for its membership. Although nurses are making significant contribution to the healthcare system in this COVID-19 pandemic, their union is still not being given recognition status. Today, JTOM calls for the recognition of the TTRNA as the recognized majority union at all of the RHAs. For tutor, the issue of contract work persists in the education sector and is negatively impacting the attainment of national education goals. It is time that the Education Act be amended to have educators at the early childhood level be recognized as teachers and be brought formally into the education system. At a time when our students and their families are grappling with various challenges caused by the pandemic, the contracts for the majority of our school social workers who are in the student support services of the Ministry of Education will not be renewed when they end in July. The fact is that there are no kind of support mechanism provided by the state for our children. Teaching and non-teaching staff are now being asked to come out to schools which have not been assessed for safety after prolonged closure. This is completely unsafe. In addition, the Ministry of Education is still not filling vacancies. This is creating a high level of staff shortages. In spite of all of these issues affecting teachers, our country's educators are still working on 2014 salaries. Today, JTOM calls for the complete resolution of all these issues which are adversely impacting the education system. For the Banking, Insurance and General Workers Union, there are outstanding negotiations at Republic Bank. Having declared more profit in the COVID-19 period than in the pre-COVID-19 time, the bank had the audacity to propose 000 for the next negotiating period. Also, can you imagine that workers in Cardi are still working on 2004 salaries, and workers in the Cipriani College of Labor are still working on 2007 salaries? Just imagine that. This is unfair to the workers, and today JTOM calls for the settlement of those long outstanding negotiations. At the Aviation, Communication and Allied Workers Union, despite the pandemic, Caribbean Airlines has opted to maintain the lease of MAX 8 airplanes, while 1,500 workers have been laid off for almost 9 months without pay, and others are asked to take salary cuts. Whilst the union's suggestion for rotation in Trinidad was rejected, Caribbean Airlines Jamaica staff are currently on rotation. In terms of issues facing sanitation workers, JTOM condemns the disrespect by the Minister of Public Utilities for his refusal to acknowledge correspondence and a proposal from the Industrial and General Sanitation Workers Union. This proposal is aimed at creating greater efficiencies in Swimco's operation. Imagine that, and the minister rejects it. Today, we at JTOM also condemn the disrespectful treatment to all the sanitation workers, especially because they risk their lives and health working in one of the most hazardous environments in the country, especially in this pandemic.
And there you have it. That's our program for this evening inside the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings, and in the last hour we were focusing on the labor movement, trade unions in Trinidad and Tobago, and of course focusing on as well Labor Day celebrations, which were on Saturday last. And of course many are saying that it was not so much of a celebration based on what would have been the traditional form of observance and recognition by the members of the labor movement here in Trinidad and Tobago. So we were focusing, as I said, on the speech, bringing some highlights of Labor Day, and the speech presented by Ansel Roger, President General of the Joint Trade Union Movement. So until next Wednesday, when we will be back again with another program, I'm Stephen Cummings saying good evening and see you next Wednesday. It was a famous poet who once said, "They came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." Words there from famous poet Martin Niemöller, 1892 to 1984. Part of the Citizens Community Forum.
When we talk about witness protection in Trinidad and Tobago, do you have any concerns that we may still not have the proper kind of witness protection program?
Our witness protection program is not the best protection program. We have had complainants wanting protection to give information about a police officer because they fear for their life.
But Mr. Cummings, I think you hit the nail on the head a little while ago, because with the COVID and with the pandemic, it has caused a lot of institutions to treat with the way you deal with business in a more efficient way.
Let's discuss the issues. Let's dialogue towards developing a deeper understanding, fostering an atmosphere of peace, all towards creating better, stronger families and communities. Right here on Isaac 98.1 FM, every Wednesday, 8 to 9 p.m. The Citizens Community Forum. Your host, Stephen Cummings.
Music for your spirit. For your spirit.
'Cause all my life you have been great. Has he been faithful to you? And all my life you have been so good. Yeah.
Your hits on your blessed best FM. Isaac 98.1 FM. Isaac 98.1 FM, playing real music variety.
Who can love me like you do? I'm a mess, I confess, but you carry me through.
Listening anywhere and everywhere on your number one family station, Isaac 98.1 FM.
Is there not a cause? ITNAC is inviting you to tune into the program Advancing the Cause every second and fourth Wednesday at 9 p.m. If you're not called to stay, you should be going somewhere doing something. Contributions to our organization can be made at any branch of First Citizens Bank, account number 1660410. For more information, call us at 624-4162 or try us at 394-2042. Is there not a cause? Yes, there is.